Welcome to another episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, where certified financial planner Loren Sherman shares thoughts on having a healthy mind, body, and spirit, an abundance of wealth inside portfolios and out, and lessons learned from clients and mentors over the years.
Hello, everyone. As always, I am your host, Loren Sherman, and today we're going to talk about how to disinherit your grandkids. This is not the type of how-to you would see pop up on Google's most popular searches. With that said, when retirees sit down with us for their initial review, more often than not, their plans are accidentally set up to potentially disinherit grandkids. Be sure to check out our graphic in the show notes for an easy-to-understand way you can see this in action. But first, let me start with a quick story about a couple I've worked with for years, Paul and Carol. I first met Paul and Carol as an introduction from Carol's sister, primarily to help them with their Medicare transition as Carol was about to turn 65 and Paul retiring at 67. As we wrapped everything up Medicare related, they asked some additional questions about a grandson with special needs. This grandson was one of 11 grandchildren in total from their 4 kids. After digging a bit deeper, I realized that Paul and Carol had an attorney who had helped put together an estate plan, an investment advisor who looked after their retirement plans, and an insurance agent who handled all of the insurance. What they did not have was anyone looking after the big picture as a whole. I see this situation often and regularly describe this using a puzzle analogy. If you dump a puzzle onto your kitchen table and everyone immediately grabs individual pieces to work with, your progress will likely be slowed and disorganized. But if you have the box in front of you and you can see the big picture, it's much easier for everyone to work together toward the common goal. Retirement planning is similar in that you need someone looking at the puzzle box so that everyone can work in harmony. Even with some nuanced planning that comes with having a grandchild with special needs, Paul and Carol's situation seemed pretty straightforward. As we started digging, I quickly realized how Paul and Carol's desire for their estate and how it would be passed to the next generations did not align with reality. Let's dive into our couple's first mistake. Paul and Carol used a local attorney who did not particularly specialize in trusts and estate plans. The attorney did a fair job of creating the documents, but Paul and Carol were never advised to fund their trust, meaning they never put any assets into it. As obvious of a step as this may sound, I've seen this fairly often, and the attorney often points the finger at the investment advisor, while the investment advisor does the same to the attorney. Regardless, Paul and Carol had essentially created an expensive stack of papers that would be meaningless without some changes. Moving on to their second mistake. I also noticed that a couple of Paul's old life insurance policies still had his father as the beneficiary, who had since passed away. Paul thought, no problem, our will says everything goes to each other, and if we both die, it's split equally between the kids. What Paul did not realize is that beneficiary designations trump instructions of a will. Even worse, the benefit cannot pay out to a deceased beneficiary, so it would have gone back into his estate, triggering additional costs and delays due to the probate process. Privacy goes out the window as well, as probate is a public process. More mistakes with number 3. The third problem we would have to fix is that much of Paul and Carol's assets left off one of their 4 kids entirely. Their last daughter was born after they did much of their beneficiary planning, and it never got updated. As we learned before, even an up-to-date will does not correct this issue. Their fourth and final mistake, per capita versus per stirpes. This one is a bit easier to grasp visually, so I've included a link in the show notes with a picture. With that said, this last issue is the most common that we see among retirees. All of Paul and Carol's beneficiaries were set up as per capita rather than per stirpes. What this means is that if any of Paul and Carol's children were to predecease them, that parent's children would also be disinherited. We see this so frequently because per capita is almost always the default beneficiary selection. Of course, some couples want their assets to be distributed per capita, but often this is not the intention. Put another way, you have to change the default selection. If you never had this conversation when purchasing the insurance in the first place, it's unlikely it was changed, as the insurance salesman or the insurance company cannot do this without your permission. Sometimes there are options outside of per capita and per stirpes with minor differences, but this gives you a good place to start the conversation and to understand the basics. Be sure to lean on professionals to help you make any changes or updates to your current plans so you can be certain that your estate is set up how you'd like. Let's talk through a quick example of the difference between per stirpes and per capita. As illustrated in the show notes, we have a grandmother, Linda, who has 3 children, John, Mary, and Bob. Linda may have many grandkids, but for the purpose of keeping things simple, we will just focus on 2 grandkids named Jason and Jill, who are John's children. So once again, we have Linda at the top as the grandmother, then John, Mary, and Bob as their 3 kids, then John's 2 children, Jason and Jill. Of course, parents never want to outlive any of their kids, but proper planning is all about preparing for as many circumstances as we can. This is especially true regarding beneficiary designations because it doesn't cost us anything more to get this right. In both of the illustrated cases, John dies before his mother, Linda. In the first scenario, Linda met with a financial advisor who helped her change her default selection and set up her beneficiaries with a per stirpes designation. When Linda eventually passes away, her grandkids, Jason and Jill, still split the inheritance their dad, John, would have received, even though he died before his mother, Linda. In the second scenario, Linda set up her beneficiaries with a per capita designation. This time, when Linda dies, her grandkids have been disinherited and receive nothing. Now, you may argue that it's rare that kids pass away before their parents, and, thankfully that's true. So it's very possible that this could be a mistake in your planning, but you never realize it and it never affects anyone. On the flip side, we could say this about a lot of things in life. We could go years and years without making a claim on our homeowner's insurance, and from a practical standpoint, it wouldn't have mattered if we even had it. You could drive around for years without liability insurance on your car, and as long as you don't get into an accident or pulled over, no one would be the wiser. The difference between per stirpes and per capita may seem like one trivial word, but we can all agree Jason and Jill would not see it as a trivial difference. This is often the world of financial planning, where minor changes can have significant impact. Well, that's all for today. We will be back in 2 weeks to chat more. Until then, check out our show notes for any links or resources that we discussed on the show. Or if you'd like to meet our team and learn more, head on over to healthywealthywiseretirement.com.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, we would love if you took a quick moment to leave an honest review. Of course, we're shooting for 5 stars, but if you have suggestions to improve the show, we would love to hear from you too. Just click on the podcast name, Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, and scroll down to ratings and review. Thanks again for your support, as this helps us reach a wider audience and help even more retirees just like you. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Loren Sherman is a certified financial planner and co-owner of Integrity Wealth Management, an investment advisor serving retirees in search of their own healthy, wealthy, and wise retirement lifestyle.